Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammad Ahmad Khan, respiratory therapist from Noor International. Today I am here with the topic of essential variables and mechanical breath types. Now, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Essential variables and mechanical breath types. The persons who are respiratory therapists and RMOs, consultants who are the end users of mechanical ventilators need to understand the essential variables and mechanical breath types. In this topic, we are cover the topic of trigger, cycling, and how trigger starts, what is trigger, what is cycling, what is BCT, breath cycle time, and controls, volume controls, pressure controls. This is the topics basically introduced by Hamilton Medical. First of all, I would like to give some introduction regarding Hamilton. So Hamilton Medical is a ventilator producing device, ventilator producing company who refers their ventilator with auto turbine and humidification and very simple to use. Here I put some intentions of Hamilton ventilators. Special intentions of Hamilton ventilators. Hamilton ventilators are specialized to keep ventilation continue with transportation. Hamilton Medical provides keep ventilation at high altitudes. Likewise, helicopters in transportation with helicopters or aeroplanes. There is a high altitude which occurs that the disturbance in volume and pressure in mechanical ventilator, but some ventilators of Hamilton Medical are able to run in high altitudes. To keep ventilation in MRI room, there are some ventilators with MRI compatible. To keep ventilation with heliox therapy, some of the patients with restrictive lung disease needs heliox therapy. Heliox therapy is the combination of oxygen and helium. Yes. To keep ventilation with dynamic lungs monitoring, weaning status monitoring, volumetric capnography monitoring, and protective ventilation tools. To keep ventilation with esophageal pressure monitoring. Esophageal pressure monitoring is a type of monitoring in which the resistance and the partial pressure of both lungs are to be monitored. To keep ventilation with automated ETT cuff pressure management. In this ETT cuff pressure management, we are settled down the pressure of 25 to 30 cm2, in which there is a very little chance to patient suffer from ventilator-associated pneumonia, ventilator-associated events, and throat sore and some other. So ETT automated ETT cuff pressure enhance the patient to safe side. E-learning. E-learning in Hamilton Medical, e-learning provides educational resources, workshops and training for mechanical ventilation and ventilators with certificates. One of end user or one of respiratory therapist or one of doctor wants to take these basic modules, feature modules, and product modules. He simple or she simple go to Hamilton Medical website and register yourself. And then after the completion of the Hamilton Medical module, there is a test he or she should be performed. And the end of the test, you will receive a certificate from Hamilton Medical in your email. And this is very useful for a clinical person. Now our topic, essential variables and mechanical breath types. Essential variables. There are basically 5 essential variables Essential variables are serves as a foundation of mechanical breath, while mechanical breaths are the foundation of ventilation modes. Basically, the essential variables target to understand the ventilation modes, how the ventilation modes working, and what are the benefits we can take from the ventilation modes. For this purpose, we should have to understand these five essential variables. The number one is triggering, the number two, cycling, the number three, controlling, number four, targeting, number five, baseline pressure or peak. Essential variables are directly related to the major ventilator control parameters. They belong to the core of intermittent positive pressure ventilation, regardless of ventilator brand and modules. So these essential variables are not only specified with Hamilton Medical, but also specified with other brands ventilators. Now, mechanical breath. So, what is mechanical breath? A mechanical breath is defined as any breath realized through a ventilator system. Here we shown a graph of breath. There is a starting point, inspiratory phase. Here the inspiratory phase completed and expiration starts until expiration is ended here. So this is a one complete inspiratory phase. To carry out mechanical ventilation, a ventilator must receive the commands from its operator on when inspiration should start and stop. When inspiration should be start and stop. When expiration should start and stop. How the delivery of inspired gas should be controlled, either volume control, either pressure control. How big the mechanical breath should be. How high the baseline or PEEP should be. So every mechanical breath takes a certain length of time to complete. The duration is breath cycle time or T cycle time, total cycle time. BCT always contain two portions, TI, expiry time, and TE, expiratory time. First of all, you should have to understand BCT. BCT is not rocket science. BCT is simple breath cycle time. One complete respiration, including inspiratory phase and expiratory phase. So BCT is breath cycle time. What is the phenomena of inspiration? The phenomena of inspiration that during inspiration, a ventilator delivers gas into a ventilator system, or we can easily say that in breathing circuit, resulting in the airway pressure to rise and the lungs are going to be inflated. Expiratory phase, expiration during inspiration. During inspiration, a ventilator stops gas delivery and allows the gas exits the ventilator, resulting in the airway pressure to drop and the lungs are deflated. And what is phenomena of BCT, TI, and TE? BCT, TI, and TE are specified with two time events. The number one is triggering and the number two is cycling. Both are the essential variables. Basically, BCT, TI, and TE are related with triggering and cycling. In the end of the presentation, I will share some questions with you and also giving answers. So the number one essential breath, essential variable is triggering. So what is triggering? Basically, triggering, we can define it as how the mechanical breath should be started, either by a ventilator or either by patient's spontaneous activity. So the reason to start inspiration is known as triggering. The reason to start inspiration is called triggering. either from ventilator or either from patient's spontaneous activity. So trigger refers to the time point when the inspiration starts. Here again, we have a complete one breath BCT. This point we are starting inspiration, and at this point the inspiration goes to be end. From this point expiration start, and at this point expiration goes to the end. So the time point where the inspiration start, this is known as trigger, and this type of triangle is the symbol of trigger. Cycling. While cycling refers to the time point when the inspiration ends. This point is a trigger, and this point is cycling where the inspiration going to be start. Now, Ti is the duration from a triggering point to the following cycling point. Te is the duration from a cycling point to the following triggering point, while BCT is the duration from a triggering point to the next triggering point. The picture shows complete these 5 points. Now, trigger mechanics, triggering mechanics. Triggering can be realized with different mechanics. The common ones are time triggering, pressure triggering, and flow triggering. I want to say the definition of triggering again. What cause or the cause of inspiration to be starts is called triggering, either from mechanical ventilator or either from patient spontaneous activity. So these are the 3 types of triggering. The time triggering also specialized only with mechanical ventilator, and the pressure triggering and flow triggering relates with patient side. Time triggering. Time triggering is also known as machine triggering or ventilator triggering, and is basics on BCT, breath cycle time, which is defined with a set rate. When you set the rate, respiratory rate, the ventilator knows the time period or automatically calculates the breath cycle time, one breath cycle time. In an example, if you want to set the respiratory rate of 10 breaths per minute. So in 1 minute, we know that we have 60 seconds. Okay, the target respiratory rate is 10 and total time is 60 seconds. So ventilator automatically calculates that the one complete breath should be 6 seconds. The one breath cycle time should be 6 seconds. I will define this as in second slide that in other words, every set rate has a corresponding BCT. For instance, if you set the respiratory rate of 10 breaths per minute, the resultant BCT is 6 seconds. If you set the rate of 10, the BCT is 6 seconds. If you set the respiratory rate of 20 breaths per minute, the resultant breath cycle time is 3 seconds. Means one complete breath goes to be complete in every 3 seconds. This shows that the common use rates and the corresponding BCTs. Here is the picture of one complete BCT. A BCT is the interval time between any 2 consecutive triggering points where whenever the defined BCT is over, a ventilator delivers inspiratory gas. Currently, all ventilation modes in Hamilton medical ventilator allow the patient to trigger, unless the patient trigger is disabled deliberately. First of all, I want to say that there are 2 types of ventilated patients. Number 1 is active patients, and the number 2 are passive patients. Active patients are, we can say that responsive patient or command following patients, or you can easily say that in medical terms that you have not sedated and paralyzed. These type of patients are known as active patients. While passive patients are fully sedated and paralyzed or non-responsive, or any type of neurological disorder in which they can breathe spontaneously. So, in other words, we can also say that sedated and paralyzed patients. So, here we have given an example that if we set the respiratory rate of 12 breaths per minute, the calculated breath cycle time is 5 seconds. Means in 5 seconds, there is one complete breath, one complete respiration will be complete, including inspiration and expiration. So here we say that the respiratory rate of 12, the actual respiratory rate will goes to be 15 breaths per minute. It means that if a responsive patient or active patient goes to be triggered in with spontaneous activity, the ventilator shows the trigger here, and the graph should be shortened. While the same rate, respiratory rate of 12 breaths per minute, we will set in a passive patient, and the actual breath outcome from the patient side, the ventilatory graph should be longer than the active patient. If so, an active patient can dominate the actual rate, which is often higher than the respiratory rate, the set rate. If the patient is passive, however, the actual and the set rate are equal. Therefore, the actual rate usually serves as the minimum of backup rate. Now, pressure triggering. Pressure triggering is a form of patient triggering. It relies on circuit or airway pressure monitoring. So we have firstly say that the pressure triggering and flow triggering are refers to the patient side, depending on patient monitoring. So for pressure triggering, we have an example that in active patients. One way to understand pressure triggering may be that you suck an empty glass bottle. You should have to take an empty glass bottle, then put the bottle at your mouth, and then suck the bottle. There is a high pressure, negative pressure generated in your bottle, but with little gas flow. The stronger you suck, the more negative the pressure is. Same like this in ventilator. Let's consider that this is a ventilator and this is a breathing circuit, and this is an ETT tube and this is a patient. Let's consider this is an inspiratory port, and let's consider this is an expiratory port. So if pressure trigger is active, the breathing circuit serves as a glass bottle. The patient's inspiratory effort caused the airway pressure to drop from the current baseline. If the pressure drops, reaches at the set virtual threshold. If you set the pressure trigger of 2 or -2, minus 0.5, minus 0.5, or anyone else, you set the threshold, the ventilator is triggered and delivers the inspiratory gas. And we can say that and the ventilator assists the trigger sensitivity from patient side. Here is the black line is the baseline or the P. We settle down, and if patient negatively responds, here this is a point, and we set the threshold of -2. So when the threshold reaches, the ventilator assists. This is a spontaneous activity of patient, and here this is a marker. Utilize pressure triggering. You must active pressure triggering and set pressure trigger sensitivity. The sensitivity is a negative value of CmH2O, such as minus 0.5, minus 2, and minus 5. The value represents as threshold, pressure threshold. Here, here's the flow trigger, or for instance, if the peak is 5 cmH2O and the trigger sensitivity is set minus 2 cmH2O. As you said, this peak of 5 and said the threshold of pressure trigger is minus 2. The ventilator is triggered if the actual airway pressure drops below 3. Let's consider this is the baseline pressure of 0, and the set peak or the baseline pressure you have set down this 5, and let's consider this is a 3 cmH2O pressure. So if you set the threshold of sensitivity minus 2 cmH2O, if the patient going to be inhale negative, the negative pressure will be generated itself here. So if the threshold is touched by the graph, the ventilator sends this is an spontaneous activity. Note down, the smaller the absolute value of sensitivity, the more sensitive the triggering and vice versa. So the pressure trigger of minus 0.5 cmH2O is more sensitive than that of minus 2.0 cmH2O. Flow triggering. Now this is the third parameter of triggering. Flow triggering also refers also match with patient side. Let's consider for understanding flow triggering let's consider flow A, flow B, and airway flow. Then again, let's consider this is a ventilator and this is a breathing circuit. This is an ETT tube and this is a completely airway with each tube. So the flow in inspiratory limb from this point and this point. This point is also known as Y piece. So this is called inspiratory limb, and from this point to this point, this is called expiratory limb, and from flow sensor or Y piece till complete airway, this is an airway flow. So let's consider the inspiratory limb is a flow A. Let's consider the expiratory limb flow is known as flow B, and then let's consider the flow inside the airway is airway flow. Further, in graph, I have previously described that from this point till this point, this is a complete respiratory phase. And from this point to this point, this is an inspiratory phase. And from this point to this point, there is an expiratory phase. Let's divide the expiratory phase in two divisions. So from the decrease of this graph, let's consider this is an early expiry time. Whenever the graph going to be straight, then let's consider this is an late expiry time. So early expiry time, what are the phenomena of early expiry time? Basically, I want to say that basically what happens in ventilator to manage PEEP or to manage ventilation in the expiratory phase. This is a very important to understand the concept of expiratory phase because we are gradually discussing the controls and the triggering relates with inspiratory phase. But there is an important to understand what happens in expiratory phase in ventilator and in lung mechanics. So at early expiration, the ventilator closes the inspiratory valve. Again, this is a ventilator, breathing circuit, airway patient. This is an inspiratory valve and this is an expiratory valve. So at early expiration, the ventilator closes its inspiratory valve and fully opens its expiratory valve for a maximum expiratory flow. The high circuit pressure, both flow A and flow B. The high circuit pressure drives the gas out and the airway pressure drops sharply. But the flow B and the expiratory airway flow rises out quickly to maximum and then decrease gradually as the circuit pressure drops. This is the phenomena of early expiration where the loop is going to be decreased but not straight. In late expiration, the ventilator start to rebuild and maintain the baseline pressure. So what is the baseline pressure? The baseline pressure is P by reducing the expiratory valve opening for a high resistance against the expiratory flow. Slightly open an inspiratory valve for a constant base flow, which is crucial for flow triggering. Basically, every time we will not set the PEEP of 5 or we will not set the PEEP of 3. Sometimes we will set the PEEP of 8. Sometimes we will set the PEEP of 10 and 12 and 15 and so on. So for this, to maintain the baseline or to maintain the PEEP, this is the phenomena we should have to understand. So here I have put a video. Let's consider this is an early expiratory time. The inspiratory valve is fully closed. This is an early expiratory time. The inspiratory valve is fully closed and the airway pressure going to be out and expiratory valve fully opens. Then the expiratory valve is halfly open and inspiratory valve is also half open in late expiration time to maintain the baseline of lungs or to maintain the PEEP of our lungs. And then in end, when the expiration going to be end, the valves of then in the end, the valve of expiratory side will be closed and then the next inspiratory phase will going to be start. Again, see the video. Let's consider this an expiratory phase going to be start. The inspiratory valve fully closed. The airway pressure drops, air out from the lungs, and the expiratory valve is fully open. Let's see here. The expiratory valve is fully open. Then in late expiratory phase, the expiratory valve is halfly open and the inspiratory valve is also halfly open to maintain the baseline or to maintain the PEEP we have set by the end user. This is a complete expiratory phase. So In flow trigger, if the detected inspiratory airway flow or the difference between flow A and flow B reaches the defined threshold, the ventilator is going to be triggered. So in ventilators, we have three graphs. Basically, we have three graphs. Number one is flow time graph, number two is pressure time graph, and number three is volume time graph. So we can easily see, we can easily monitor in ventilator. Let's see here, I'm sharing you a ventilator. Let's see here, there is an simulation of a ventilator. So this is the pressure time graph, and this is the flow time graph. And if we want to take a volume time graph, so this is our volume and time graph, volume time graph. So again, we are going to our presentation. So this is a threshold. If the flow trigger has been settled down and reaches at the desired flow trigger, then ventilator assist. This is an spontaneous activity of the patient, and then inspiratory phase going to be start. One second, we also have a ventilator. I want to share you the flow triggering sensitivity here in ventilator. This is a C2, Hamilton C2. So during ventilation, we are going in controls. This is a flow trigger or the threshold which is settled down by the end user. So this is a 2 liters per minute, the 3 liters per minute. So this is a 4 liter and this is a 5. So the 5 liters per minute is a very high flow trigger sensitivity. So we should have to settle down between 2 to 3 liters per minute. So this is a good flow trigger sensitivity. So now we can set that 0.5, 1 or 2 or 5 liters per minute flow trigger sensitivity. The smaller the set value, the more sensitive the flow trigger is, and vice versa. Remember, for a ventilator patient, ventilated patient, flow trigger is generally easier than pressure trigger. Yes, the flow trigger is generally easier than the pressure trigger because this is a very easy to understand and under the same condition of use. And when we start a ventilator, first by default setting, the flow trigger is settled down. If an end user want to take their patient on pressure trigger, they will manage manually the pressure trigger. So in the end, the topic of trigger, we have some abnormal patient triggering. The number one is insensitive, means ventilator go not senses the patient side, either flow or either pressure. And number two is overly sensitive. First, we define the insensitive, the risk of mistriggering. Insensitive, the first form of ventilate, the first form is that a ventilated patient has inspiratory effort, but the ventilator does not respond. The common cause are either the patient effort is too big. Number one, the common cause are patient effort is too weak. And the number two, the desired setting by settle down the end user is very not enough, is very disturbed setting. So what are the misuse of insensitivity? You will face the patient signals are too weak, low set the trigger sensitivity. Number two, overly sensitive. The second form is auto triggering, which means that the ventilator is triggered when the patient does not inhale. Typically, auto triggering appears as a series of quick and rhythmic mechanical prayer. So, auto triggering or overly triggering, or if you tackle down that your patient is sedated and paralyzed, but the ventilator shows too many triggers. Here is a trigger, here is a trigger, here is a trigger, here is a trigger, and here is a trigger. So, if you going to be worry about your triggers, either your patient is sedated, paralyzed, or you can say that the patient is totally non-active or passive. But why these are triggers shown here again and again? So I gather 5 reasons for this. The number one is condensation. If you use the humidifier in your mechanical ventilation, there is some water tackle down in your breathing circuit. So the tackle down water going to be work as a trigger by the airway pressure. So you should have to remove the water from the breathing circuit. The number two is expiratory membrane error. In ventilator expiratory site or expiratory port, we have a expiratory membrane here. The phenomena of expiratory membrane is to control the volume or the pressure settled down by the end user. So if the expiratory membrane is damaged, or there is a dirt or there is a blood present in expiratory membrane, so it can also work as overly sensitive. The number third point is flow trigger error. This is a flow trigger used in mechanical ventilator, Hamilton Medical. So sometime or some organization use flow sensor again and again. So by this presentation or by this station, I want to say that the flow sensor is not a reusable product. The flow sensor is a disposable product. The lifetime of flow sensor is 28 days on a single patient. In a single patient, we should use only one flow sensor, then discard it in dustbin. Because there is a very thin membrane present in flow sensor, sometimes water vapors or sometimes patient's sputum are going to be stuck in flow sensor, and then it works as overly sensitive triggering or two measures. And we can easily say that the flow sensor error is too much in overly sensitive error. So we should have to remove, or we should have to discard after every patient or after 20 days on a single patient. Yes, on a single patient, if 28 days done, we should have to discard the flow sensor and put the new flow sensor on the ventilated patient. We have a 7 days life of breathing circuit. After 7 days, we discarded the breathing circuit, and we have a lifetime of HMA filter, breathing filter, or bacterial filter of 24 hours. So after 24 hours, we discarded the HMA filter. So after 28 days, we should have to discard flow sensor, and this is a guideline of Hamilton Medical. The number 5 is gas leakage. If there is any gas leakage in circuit or inspiratory side, expiratory side, there is a overly sensitive error will be called. And there's a cardiac oscillation. If there is a cardiac oscillation present in patient side, that can also cause overly sensitive trigger error. So here we are coming on the topic of cycling. The cycling essential variable of mechanical breath. Cycling. Cycling refers to the end of inspiration. The time point where the inspiration going to be end. Here, this point is called cycling or cycle. So the BCT is the sum of TI and TE. If the BCT is given, an increase in TI causes a corresponding decrease in TE and vice versa. Cycling mechanism, time cycling and flow cycling. Basically, cycling has been divided in two basic phenomena. The number one is time cycling and the number two is flow cycling. Time cycling for passive patient and flow cycling for active patients, and time cycling determined by machine or mechanical ventilator, while flow cycling is determined by patient side. So with time cycling, you can define TI. You will set the inspiratory time. Let's consider you have settled down the BCT or bed cycle time of 3 seconds. So you have an option of inspiratory phase to set manually. So in 3-second BCT, if you settle down the inspiratory time of 1 second, the expiratory time automatically settle down 2 seconds. If you set the inspiratory time of 1.5 second, the expiry time goes to settle down automatically 1.5 seconds. If you set the TI inspired time of 2 seconds, that TI goes to be settled down 1 second. So we will set the TI and the TE automatically settle down. So time cycling by setting TI, in this case, the operators directly set the TI in seconds. A ventilator switches from inspiration to expiration when the set TI is over. Here the set TI is over and TE going to be started. This method applies on both volume and pressure breaths. Yes, this method applies in both volume and pressure breath. In volume breath, TI applies. In volume breath, IE ratio applies and also peak flow applies. While in pressure breath, TI applies, IE ratio applies, but not peak flow. So, flow cycling. Flow cycling is another way to terminate inspiration based on the change of inspiratory flow. It is designed for active patients and is the key property of support breaths. Time cycling for passive patients, flow cycling for active patients. In a pressure breath, the inspiratory flow is uncontrolled. Yes, the inspiratory flow is uncontrolled. If you set the pressure, if you set the pressure of 20, if you set the pressure of 25, the inspiratory flow or the volume will be uncontrolled. Sometimes the volume going to be achieved the target pressure, which is a 300 target volume, or sometimes the volume will be 400, sometimes the volume will be 500. The ventilator targets to our targets in pressure breath to achieve the desired target pressure control or pressure support. So in pressure breath, the inspiratory flow is uncontrolled. Typically, the inspiratory flow rises quickly to the peak at beginning and then drops gradually back to zero. So here we have completed the cycling topic. Now the third essential variable, controlling. So what is controlling? The third essential variable is controlling. Controlling is defined as the mechanism on how a ventilator controls gas during inspiration. Basically, we have ventilatory modes of two types. The number one is volume control, and number two is pressure controls. So these types are gathered in controlling essential variable. So at any given time, a ventilator can only control either the volume pressure, volume breaths or a pressure breaths, but not both on a single time. So in addition, there are two extended controlling mechanism. Pressure controlling has a variant called adaptive controlling. Yes, in pressure controlling, we have more subdivisions with adaptive controlling or hybrid controlling. So first we will define the volume controlling mechanism, then we will define the pressure controlling mechanism, and further categories of pressure controlling like hybrid controlling and one other. So in volume controlling, flow controlling, a better term for volume controlling is flow controlling, because during inspiration, a ventilator actually controls the flow of inspiratory gas delivered into the circuit. At the end of inspiration, the settled tidal volume is delivered. So volume controlling is shaped with three primary controls. So volume control can be controlled by three basic primary parameters. The number one is tidal volume, the number two is inspired time, and the number three is peak flow. Typically, we set tidal volume and inspired time, or tidal volume and peak flow. The ventilator calculates the third one automatically. So volume controlling may have a secondary control, inspiratory flow pattern or square pattern in the third most common one. However, some ventilators provide more flow pattern. For example, Hamilton G5S1 ventilators provide square, descending, and sine flow patterns. In Hamilton Medical, there are two models known as Hamilton G5 and Hamilton S1, which are also have too many features, too many advanced features. So in Hamilton G5 and S1, we have the flow patterns of a square, the flow patterns of descending and sine flow patterns. So we will gather complete patient condition by this flow controlling, by this graphical representation. The major perceived advantages of volume controlling is to stable tidal volume as well as minute volume. Yes, with minute volume, with which we may comfortable. So I want to discuss that the normal tidal volume is 6 to 8 ml per kg of ideal body weight. Yes, for ideal body weight, not actual body weight, because the actual body weight may be vary in every time. Today, if a patient with 5.5 feet, if its actual body weight is like 70 kg, so after 1 month, it not will be 70 kg, it will be 75 kg, or it can be 65 kg. So we cannot rely on actual body weight. For setting the tidal volume, we will rely on ideal body weight. So how can we achieve ideal body weight? We can achieve ideal body weight by a formula. We will find the ideal body weight by measuring the height of the patient. So also the minute volume. So minute volume also the combination of or the product of tidal volume multiplied by respiratory rate. So I want to show the ideal body weight. So how can we set down the ideal body weight? So here is a ventilator. Let's stand by the ventilator. So this is a standby ventilator. So this is an adult pediatric setting. So here is a height we will going to be put here. So for taking out the ideal body weight of patient in kilograms, first we measure the height of the patient. If the measured height is 170 centimeter, like we see that the height of the patient is 170 centimeter and the patient is male, the ideal body weight is 66 kg. And in females of 170 centimeter height, the ideal body weight is 62 kg. So we will settle down the tidal volume is 6 to 8 ml per kg ideal body weight. So how we will find the ideal body weight? We will find by ventilator through this mechanism. Simple put, the height and gender, we will find the ideal body weight of patient. So what is pressure controlling? The phenomena, the mechanism with pressure controlling, the ventilator first draw a target airway pressure profile according to the setting of TI and inspiratory pressure. Airway pressure. During inspiration, the ventilator dynamically adjusts the inspired gas flow. Yes, during inspiration, the flow can be varied. It can be 60 liters per minute, it can be 70 liters per minute, or the tidal volume also vary. It can be 300 ml per ml, or it can be 400, it can be 500. So in pressure control, ventilation, the flow and the volume will be vary every time. So inspiration gas flow to minimize the gap between the actual airway pressure and the target pressure profile. This means that the ventilator increase the inspiratory flow if the monitored pressure is much below the target pressure. It decreases the inspiratory flow if the monitored pressure is a bit below the target pressure. It stops the inspiratory flow if the monitored pressure matches the target pressure. So, ventilator is intelligent device. Ventilator will vary their volume. It can decrease, it can increase, or it can settle down on a base pressure to target the desired pressure control or pressure support. So pressure controlling is shaped with two primary controls, TI and inspiratory pressure. Inspiratory pressure refers to the intended positive pressure applied above PEEP, as I have discussed the pressure control and the pressure support. It the gas to move into the lungs. In Hamilton medical ventilators, inspiratory pressure is labeled either pressure control for mandatory breath and pressure support for spontaneous breath. So, what is mandatory breath? Mandatory breath, we have decided, also discussed before what are mandatory breaths. Mandatory breaths are basically ventilator cycle breaths. Basically, I have said that if we set the BCT of 3 seconds, so in every 3 seconds, ventilators knows that the ventilator should have to give pressure to the patient. So if the ventilator follow the desired PCT, so the pressure is known as pressure control. If the ventilator deliver gas by the spontaneous activity of the patient, the desired pressure is called pressure support. So the pressure support refers with patient. So adaptive controlling. So what is adaptive controlling? Adaptive controlling represents the outcome of the effort to exploit the advantages, minimize the advantages of both volume and pressure controlling. Basically, I can say that there is a combination of volume control and pressure control, because in adaptive controlling we target the tidal volume, not pressure control. We set the tidal volume and the desired volume will be achieved through pressure controlling. In normal volume control mechanism, we set the tidal volume and the tidal volume achieved through flow. But in adaptive controlling, we also set the tidal volume, but the target tidal volume will achieve through pressure. So the normal volume controlled CMV is known as volume targeted flow based. And adaptive controlling, we can say that volume targeted but pressure based. So this is the basic mechanism. The CMV, the normal volume control is a flow based, and the adaptive control is pressure based volume targeted. In detail, the ventilator does the following. What is the mechanism? In simple, it increases inspiratory pressure. If the monitored tidal volume is below the target, it decreases inspiratory pressure. If the monitored tidal volume is above the target, it keeps inspiratory pressure unchanged if the both tidal volume are equal. Controlling is completed here, and now we are discussing what is targeting, the fourth essential variable of mechanical breath. So what is targeting? Basically, targeting is said that in volume controlling, how much volume we should have to target. In pressure controlling, how much pressure control or pressure support we should have to be target. So targeting is the fourth essential variable, and to define the size of mechanical breath, the size of inspiratory phase, size of mechanical breath. Targeting is also known as limiting with the same meaning. So targeting, limiting, and the size of breath. So in simple words, the targeting is always paired with the controlling type. The target parameter is tidal volume with volume controlling, inspiratory pressure with pressure controlling, tidal volume with adaptive controlling. So when the set targeting is reached, the ventilator stops delivering further gas into the circuit. Reaching the target, however, does not necessarily mean immediate cycling from inspiration to expiration. So the fifth and the last essential variable is baseline pressure, the P. The P stands for positive and expiratory pressure. What is P? Basically, in expiratory phase, if the PEEP is zero, so in expiratory phase, our lungs will be collapsed. Our alveoli will be going to be collapsed. So by default, naturally, our baseline pressure, our PEEP is 3 to 5 cmH2O in every person. But in ventilated patient, there is no muscle activity, there is no spontaneous activity. So it is the safe side, but it's very important to set the peak 3 to 5 minimum to any patient. Also, PEEP works on the type 1 respiratory failure, or we can say that in hypoxic patient, if the PO2 level is less than 80, we should have to increase a therapeutic PEEP. So we will not set the PEEP of 5. If the patient's PO2 level decrease from 80, we will set the PEEP of 8 we will set the PEEP of 10 to target the PO2 level. So what is PEEP? PEEP is the baseline pressure. PEEP stands for is the positive and expiratory pressure, and is the baseline pressure above which the inspiratory pressure is applied immediately. So let's consider this is the baseline pressure, means our lung is going to be collapsed. So we will not going to be collapsed our lungs. We will set the PEEP. So in expiratory phase, this is a baseline where the some pressure is going to be achieved. So the one other target of PEEP is to maintain FRC. What is FRC? Functional residual capacity. Basically, FRC is the combination of residual volume and expiratory reserve volume, which is approximately 2500 in an adult. So to maintain FRC, we should have to set the PEEP in ventilated patient. So PEEP is expressed, or the SI unit of PEEP is CmH2O, and counts from 0 or atmospheric pressure. PEEP is adjustable in all ventilators. PEEP is generated by interaction between the expiratory gas flow and the resistance imposed by the expiratory valve of the ventilator. So these are the benefits of PEEP. It increase or maintain FRC. It improves oxygenation. So PEEP keep the lungs units open. What are the lung units? The lung units are alveoli. Improve lungs compliance. So we have completed our 5 essential variables. So we have a little bit topic of breath types here. So what are the 5 basic essential variables working? So from variables to mechanical breaths, we have learned of 5 essential breaths. So this chart requires just 3 variables. The number 1 is triggering, the number 2 is cycling, the number 3 is controlling. While PEEP is applicable in all breath types. So what is the topic? Our topic is breath types. So basically there are 2 types of breaths. The number 1 is mandatory breaths. Number 2 is spontaneous breath. So what is a mandatory breath? Here we need to explain 2 terms, mandatory breaths and spontaneous breath. If a mechanical breath is a time cycle, it is a mandatory breath. If a breath is time cycled, we have set the time of inspiration or BCT. So if the breath is time cycled, it is a mandatory breath. With mandatory breath, the ventilator does all or most of work of breathing. Mandatory breath has 2 types. What are the 2 types? The number 1 is if a mandatory breath is time triggered. It is a ventilator triggered mandatory breath, or we can say that VTMB. If we set a desired time, let's consider we set the BCT or breath cycle time of 3 seconds. So in every 3 seconds, ventilator knows to generate a new breath. So this breath is called mandatory breath, or also can say that ventilator triggered mandatory breath. So if a mandatory breath is patient trigger, if the mandatory breath is generated by the spontaneous activity of patient, see, this is known as patient trigger mandatory breath or PTMB. It is also known as assist breath. So if a mechanical breath is patient triggered and flow cyclic, it is a spontaneous breath. What is a spontaneous breath? So with spontaneous breath, the patient does all or most of work of breathing, and spontaneous breath can be supported or unsupported by the mechanical ventilator. Yes, the spontaneous breath can be supported or can be unsupported by the mechanical breath. We have an spond mode in mechanical ventilator. So this phenomena we can easily understand in the spond mode of mechanical ventilator. Here I want to say that there are basically two types of spond modes. The number one is pressure spond modes, and the number two is volume support spond mode. The number one is pressure support spond mode, and number two is volume support spond mode. So most of the ventilators we have find pressure support spond modes. In Hamilton G5 and S1, we have an option of volume support spond mode, in which we will taper down the volume of patient, and patient relies on this mode. And if the patient will not tolerate the spond mode of volume control or either pressure control spond mode, the ventilator will automatically convert in SIMV mode or any desired apneic settings. So classification of mechanical breath. Here we have 3x3 matrix for classification of mechanical breath. Number one is time trigger, time cycle, and then volume control while volume controlling. So this is known as VTMB, volume ventilator targeted mandatory breath. So number two is patient triggered time cycle by volume controlling. So this is known as volume PTMB, patient trigger mandatory breath. So in patient trigger flow cycle, we have no volume controlling option. Also in pressure controlling, this is a pressure VTMB, pressure PTMB, pressure response breath, and so on. So here we are with our last slide. This is a conclusion. In this learning module, we have 5 essential breaths: trigger, cycling, controlling, targeting, peak. To the knowledge of essential breath is very useful because the variables are directly related to the ventilatory controlling parameters. So by applying this knowledge, essential variables, we can identify 8 mechanical breath types. Yes, we can find 8 mechanical breath types. The mechanical breath types are the foundation of ventilation modes. So this is the very important topic. Here we discuss. This is my email address with Hamilton Medical. I'm a respiratory therapist. Again, I want to introduce myself. I'm a respiratory therapist from Noor International, Karachi. This is my official email address. If you have any type of clinical issue in Hamilton Medical ventilators all over Pakistan, not only in Karachi, all over Pakistan, you can email me on this email address. We will inshallah resolve your query, or if I cannot resolve your query, I will contact with Hamilton Medical, or I will resolve with any type of reason, with any type of things, I will resolve your query. So in last, I have some questions with you to share with all of you. So number one, which statement is true in your opinion? First of all, I want to say that from the presentation of essential variables and mechanical breath types, we have concluded 15 questions. with MCQs. These are frequently asking questions, FAQs. So I have put here the answers. The answer one can be true, two answers can be true, and all three answers can be true. So the number one, which statement is true in your opinion? An adaptive breath is adaptively controlled. A ventilator triggered means VTMB is time cycled. The number third, a ventilator triggered mandatory breath VTMB is time triggered. So the answer is all three are correct. So in question number two, what are the key properties of the spontaneous breath? Number one, it is a flow or pressure trigger, time cycle, and pressure control. Number two, it is a flow or pressure triggered, flow cycle and pressure control. Number three, it is a time triggered, time cycle, and pressure control. So the answer is option number two. It is a flow or pressure triggered, flow cycle, and pressure control. Number three, what do we need to know about essential variables? Number one, essential variables are directly related to ventilator control parameters. Number two, when variables are not really important. So number three, variables are basis of mechanical breaths. So what is the answer? So the answer is option number one and option number three. Option number one and option number three. Both two answers are correct and the other one is incorrect. So question number four, what is the mechanical breath? Option, an intensive breath. Number two, a breath that is realized through a ventilator system. Number three, unnatural breath. So the answer is number two, a breath that is realized through a ventilator system. So the answer is number two. Question number five. What is breath cycle time, PCT? The duration of complete mechanical breath, length of time when the ventilator delivers gas into the breathing circuit, length of time when a ventilator allows gas exits from a ventilator system. So the answer is number one, duration of a complete mechanical breath. Answer is number one, duration of a complete mechanical breath. Question number six. In a passive patient, if the rate is set by 20 breaths per minute, what is the BCT, breath cycle time? 3 seconds, 5 seconds, or 4 seconds? So the answer is option number one, 3 seconds. Question number seven. Of the three flow triggering settings, which one is the most sensitive? Number one, 1.5 liter per minute. Number two, 2.5 liter per minute. Number three, 0.5 liters per minute. So number three, 0.5 liters per minute. Question number eight, what is or are the common causes of auto triggering? Number one, very sensitive setting of flow triggering or pressure triggering. Number two, gas leak. Number three, water in the breathing circuit. So answer is all 1, 2, and 3 are correct. Question number 9. If the set rate is 20 breath per minute and we said the IE ratio is 1:1, what are TI and what is TE? So TI is 1.5 second and TE is 1.5 second. Option number 2, TI is 2 seconds and TE is 1 second. Option number 3, TI is 1 second and TE is 2 seconds. The answer is option number 1, TI is 1.5 second and TE is also 1.5 seconds. So answer is number 1. Question number 10, of a volume breath with VT 500 ml. It is said TI is shortened. What will happen to peak inspirated flow? Peak inspirated flow increases. Peak inspirated flow stays unchanged. Peak inspirated flow decreases. So the answer is option number 1, peak inspiratory flow increases. Question number 11, if flow cycling setting in percentage is increased, what happened to the resulting TI? So the TI will decrease, TI will stay unchanged, TI will increase. So the answer is option number 1, TI will decrease. Question number 12, what does controlling variables means? Option number 1, it means the duration of a complete mechanical breath. It means the size of a mechanical breath to be delivered. It means the mechanism with which a ventilator control gas delivery during inspiration. Option number 3 is correct. It means the mechanism with which a ventilator controls gas delivery during inspiration. So option number 3 is correct. Then question number 13. What is the statement is true in your opinion? With volume controlling, a ventilator control gas flow during inspiration. With pressure controlling, a ventilator regulates gas delivery. Based on the monitored airway pressure during inspiration. With hybrid controlling, a ventilator controls both flow and pressure simultaneously. So the answer is option number 1, option number 2, and option number 3. All 3 answers are correct. So which statement is true in your opinion? Question number 14. Adaptive controlling is more similar to pressure controlling. Adaptive controlling is more similar with volume controlling. So the answer is number 1. Adaptive controlling is more similar with pressure controlling. Then the last question. Which of the parameters is a targeting variable? Number 1, IE ratio. Number 2, tidal volume. And then number 3, inspiratory pressure. So the answer is number 2 and number 3. Tidal volume and inspiratory pressure. 2 answers are correct. So here we have completed our presentation, the topic with the essential variables and mechanical breath types. So if anyone wants to register yourself in Hamilton Medical or Hamilton Medical ventilators modules, so I will share you how to register yourself. Click on Hamilton Medical website, then e-learning. Then after e-learning, we will click on pre-registration or login. So first, everyone should have to register yourself on e-learning. Then after registration, you have to, then during registration, you should have to put in your email address. Then after a successful registration yourself on e-learning, there will be a confirmation message going to be your email. So you will confirm by yourself through your email. Then after confirmation, you will proceed to the next. So here is the point. If you have not maintained your login, so first you're going to be, I want to create my Hamilton account. So if you have created your account, you will achieve your account. After opening your account, you will see 50 modules, in which 6 are basic modules, 12 are featured modules, and the other ones are product modules. So these are the complete modules, basic modules, featured modules, and product modules. So the today's topic is essential variables and mechanical breath types. If you want a certificate or certified lecture, you should have to register yourself, then go to this site